No wife, no kids, no life. That was my brother's family's verdict at Christmas. They all nodded in agreement as they talked about how my savings were pointless, how I was just taking up space. I smiled, stood up, and left. 3 days later, my voicemail was overflowing with their frantic messages. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but after what happened at our family Christmas gathering, I need to get this off my chest. Fair warning, this might be long. I'm still trying to process everything. You know that moment when you step into a room and everyone suddenly falls silent? That's how my Christmas morning began. I arrived at my mom's house at exactly 10 a.m. the time she had told me to come, only to realize everyone else had been there for hours. The presents under the tree had already been opened, breakfast dishes were clearly being put away, and my brother Andrew's son, Christian, was completely absorbed in his new video game. That should have been my first red flag. They hadn't even waited for me, though my mom had specifically said 10 a.m. This was our first Christmas without Dad, who had passed away in October, and everything felt. Mom hugged me, but there was something forced about her smile. My sister-in-law, Gabriella, barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, you made it," she muttered, as if I were some distant acquaintance who had wandered in uninvited. I set my gifts down by the tree, pushing aside the awkwardness. Christian, bless him, was the only one genuinely happy to see me, immediately running over to show off his new gaming setup. That kid had always been the bright spot in family gatherings. But before I could respond, Andrew cut in. "Don't bother Uncle Dominic. He probably doesn't understand these things anyway. Too busy with his whatever he does." The jab wasn't subtle. I've done well for myself, working remotely in tech while traveling, wherever I want. Dad always supported my choices, even when they didn't align with the traditional path Andrew took. But since Dad passed, the snide remarks about my lifestyle had only increased. Things really went downhill during lunch. Mom had made Dad's Christmas roast for the first time since he passed, and everyone was quiet until Gabriella decided to break the silence. "So, Dominic, anyone special in your life yet?" she asked. "At your age, you should really think about settling down. Christian needs cousins his age." Before I could respond, Andrew jumped in. "Oh, he's too busy living the bachelor life. No wife, no kids, no real life, right?" He laughed. But there was something pointed about it. And the worst part, no one defended me. Some nodded, others just looked away. But it was clear that this wasn't the first time they had done this discussion about my life. I kept my cool, focusing on my food. "My life is actually pretty full," I said simply. "Full of what?" Gabriella challenged, setting down her fork. "Working all day behind a screen, traveling alone to empty hotel rooms. That's not living, it's just existing. You're wasting your potential. Your father would have wanted." My voice became sharper than I intended. "Don't tell me what Dad would have wanted." The tension at the table was suffocating. Mom tried to shift the conversation, asking about New Year's plans, but Andrew wasn't done. "You know what? We need to talk about this." Andrew leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he were about to impart some deep wisdom. "The will reading is next week, and we need to be realistic here. You've got all this money saved up, but no responsibilities, while we're trying to give Christian the best life possible. It's not fair." That's when I noticed Mom's expression. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. "What do you mean realistic?" I asked, though I was already starting to piece it together. Gabriella jumped in, her tone artificially sweet. "We've had some expenses. Christian's private school, the house renovations. Your dad promised to help before he, we had to borrow against what we knew was coming from the will." My stomach dropped. "Borrow from where?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Mom spoke, barely above a whisper. "Your portion, honey. They need it. You have so much saved already, and they have a family to think about." It felt like a punch to the gut. "You took money from my inheritance without asking me?" "Borrowed," Andrew corrected, as if that somehow softened the betrayal. "And honestly, what were you going to do with it anyway? You're just a waste of space in this family. No real connections, no one depending on you, just floating through life while the rest of us handle real responsibilities." Everyone nodded, even Mom, though she looked pained through it. The only one who seemed uneasy was Christian, who had stopped eating and was staring at his plate. I stood up slowly, the sound of my chair scraping against the floor cutting through the silence. They were all probably expecting me to explode. Instead, I just smiled. "Thanks for lunch, Mom. I need to go." "Oh, don't be dramatic," Gabrielle started, but I was already heading for the door. Behind me, I heard Andrew mutter something about me, always running away from confrontation. I drove home in a daze. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already blowing up with messages, mostly from Mom, saying we need to talk things through as a family. One from Andrew, telling me to man up and face reality. I haven't responded to any of them yet. Instead, I called Dad's lawyer and left a message. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to find out exactly what they did with my inheritance and what they really meant by borrowing." And you want to know the worst part? I kept thinking about my last conversation with Dad, just a week before he passed. He made me promise to take care of the family, but also to stand my ground. At the time, I thought it was just medication talking. Now I'm wondering if he knew, if he saw this coming. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I know I can't let this slide. Not just because of the money, but because of what it represents. They want to talk about real life and responsibilities. Fine, let's talk. My phone is still buzzing. I think I'll let it ring a little longer. Update. First, I want to thank you all for the support on my last post. I never expected such an overwhelming response. A lot has happened in the past 48 hours, and honestly, I'm still trying to process it all. What I found out goes way beyond what I could have imagined. This goes deeper than I ever imagined. Matter of fact, yesterday morning, I met with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Wilson. The moment I walked in, I could tell something was off. He didn't look surprised to see me. That was my first clue. "I've been expecting your call," he said, pulling out a thick folder. "Your father left specific instructions regarding the situation." Turns out, Dad knew. He knew everything. The meeting began with Mr. Wilson showing me a series of loan documents, all in my name. My signature had been forged on at least 6 different documents over the past year, each one withdrawing money from my portion of the inheritance. Dad had apparently placed that money in a trust. The total amount, just over $285,000. I felt sick looking at those signatures. They weren't even good forgeries. But here's where it gets interesting. Mr. Wilson pulled pulled out another document, Dad's real will, dated just 2 weeks before he passed. Your father amended it after a concerning conversation with your brother, he explained. Then he showed me the bank statement. Andrew and Gabriella weren't just struggling, they were drowning in debt. The private school they were constantly bragging about, they hadn't paid tuition in months. The house renovations, mostly funded by credit card. They had been living way beyond their means for years, using Dad's declining health as leverage to borrow money. While Mr. Wilson was explaining all of this, my phone kept buzzing. When we took a short break, I finally checked it. 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, dozens of texts. A few highlights. Andrew, you're being selfish. Christian's future is at stake here. Gabriella, your father would be ashamed of your behavior. And lastly, from Mom, please, honey, we need to talk this through. They've made mistakes, but they're family. But you want to know the message that hit the hardest? It was Christian. Uncle Dom, I'm sorry about Christmas. Dad and Mom were wrong to say those things. He's only 12, yet he seems to understand more than his parents. Then Mr. Wilson revealed Dad's master stroke. The amended will had clear conditions. Any money taken through unauthorized loans must be repaid before anyone can have access to their full inheritance. And the best part, Dad put me in charge of overseeing the repayment plan. Your father was very clear about this, Mr. Wilson said, handing me a handwritten letter from Dad. Dominic understands the value of money and responsibility better than anyone gives him credit for. He'll make the right choices. Just as we were finishing up, Mr. Wilson hit me with one final bombshell. There's something else you should know, he said, pulling out another document. Last month, your brother approached me, trying to have you finally declared financially responsible. You want to control over your entire portion of the inheritance. Suddenly, all the judgmental remarks about my lifestyle and travels made sense. They weren't just criticizing me, they were laying the groundwork for a case against me. As I left the lawyer's office, another voicemail came through. This time, it was Gabriella. Her voice was unsteady. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand. The school is threatening to expel Christian if we don't pay by next week. Please, we can work something out. I sat in my car for a long time, rereading Dad's letter, and near the end, he had written, son, they'll try to use guilt. They'll call you selfish. Remember, real responsibility isn't about giving into demand. It's about making tough choices for the right reason. Then came a line that stopped me cold. Check the garage at the old house. Bottom shelf, behind the paint can. I left something there you'll need. I drove straight to Dad's, Mom's house. No one was home, which was a relief. The garage was exactly as he had left it. His tools still arranged with military precision. Behind the paint can, I found a small fireproof safe. The combination? My birthday. Inside was another letter, several USB drives, and a meticulously detailed ledger of every loan Andrew had taken out over the years. Not just from my inheritance, but from Dad as well. The amounts were staggering. The letter began, if you're reading this, they finally pushed too far. Here's everything you need to protect yourself and help them learn. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. They're coming over tomorrow morning. Please come. We need to sort this out as a family. I looked at the content of the safe spread out on my desk and back at Dad's letter. The last line read, sometimes love means standing firm. You're stronger than they think you are. Tomorrow's meeting was going to be interesting. I'd already made copies of everything and sent them to Mr. Wilson for safekeeping. I was done being the family pushover, but I wasn't here for revenge either. Dad trusted me to handle this the right way, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The latest message on my phone was from Christian. Are you coming tomorrow? I hope you do. Someone needs to tell them the truth. Out of all the messages, that was the one I chose to focus on. Update 2. I should have known something was off the moment I pulled up to Mom's house this morning. 3 extra cars were in the driveway. Andrew hadn't just brought Gabriella, he had brought reinforcements. Inside, Aunt Linda, Uncle Pete, and a family friend who had happened to be a financial advisor were already seated in the living room, arranged like some kind of intervention panel. The moment I stepped inside, Andrew set the tone. Good, you're here. Now we can discuss how to fix the mess you're making of this family. I almost laughed. This was their play? Mom hovered nervously in the kitchen doorway, already gripping a tissue like she was bracing for a breakdown. Gabriella sat perfectly composed on the couch, her makeup flawless, like she was about to walk into a business meeting instead of a family showdown. Christian was nowhere in sight, probably went to a friend's house to keep him away from the chaos. I walked over and sat down, not just anywhere. I took Dad's old armchair, the one by the window, let the games begin. Something about sitting in Dad's chair gave me strength. I didn't say a word, I just waited. Andrew had always hated silence. It makes him uncomfortable. Sure enough, he rushed to fill the void. We've been talking, he said, gesturing around the room, and we think you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Dad's will, it's causing unnecessary strain. But we have a proposal. Their financial advisor friend pulled out a folder. That's when I noticed the logo. It was from the same firm that manages Mom's mortgage. Interesting. The proposal was exactly what I expected. They wanted to restructure the inheritance. Essentially, they would get immediate access to their full share plus temporary control over mine to help manage family assets more efficiently. In return, they graciously agreed to start repaying the loan in 5 years. I let them finish. Then I pulled out Dad's ledger. Before we go any further, I said, flipping to a marked page, let's talk about the Mountain View property. The room went dead silent. Aunt Linda suddenly became very interested in her coffee. And for those asking in the comments, Mountain View was Dad's rental property. 3 fully paid off units, generating steady income. Everyone thought he had left it to Mom in the will. The Mountain View property isn't relevant here, Andrew said way too quickly. I turned the ledger around for them to see. Really? Because according to this, you took out a second mortgage on it 8 months ago. You used Mom's power of attorney while Dad was in the hospital. Did you tell her that? Mom's tissue slipped from her hands onto the floor. What is he talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. It was temporary, Gabriella jumped in. We needed capital for an investment opportunity. It's all under control. Under control? I turned to their financial advisor friend. Is that why the property is in pre-foreclosure? That's when Mom broke down. Not quiet tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that made everyone flinch. Those units, Brooks and I bought those when we first got married. That was our retirement plan. Andrew shot me a look of pure hatred. You had no right to go digging into private family matters. Private? Like forging my signature on loan documents? Or like the 3 credit cards you opened in Mom's name? More silence. The financial advisor started gathering his papers. That's different, Andrew snapped, his voice edging towards desperation. We were protecting the family interest. You never understood what that means. You just travel around, no responsibilities, while we lost $500,000 in online trading. I cut in. Andrew's jaw clenched. Borrowed against every asset you could find. Maxed out Christian's college fund. Gabriella shot got up from the couch, furious. Do you think you're so perfect? At least we're trying to build something. What do you have? Empty apartments in different cities? Photos of places no one cares about? I met her gaze calm. I have no debt, I said quietly. And I have Dad's trust. A small voice interrupted from the stairs. Is it true about my college fund? Everyone turned. Christian sat on the middle step, clutching his phone. He must have been listening the whole time. Honey, go to your room, Gabriella started. But Christian cut her off. I recorded everything, he said, his voice shaking. From the start, Uncle Dom wasn't lying about you stealing, was he? The next few minutes were, oh my goodness, chaos. Gabriella was crying. Andrew was shouting. Mom was still sobbing about Mountain View. Aunt Linda and Uncle Pete slipped out during the commotion. The financial advisor quietly handed me his card before leaving. Turns out he'd been trying to warn the family about Andrew's schemes for months. And in the midst of it all, Christian came and sat beside me. He didn't say anything. He just took the armrest of Dad's chair. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. I pulled out the final document. Dad's amended will, the one with the repayment conditions. Here's what's going to happen, I said, laying it all out. Mountain View goes into immediately trust management to stop the foreclosure. All credit cards in Mom's name are now canceled. Christian's remaining college fund is frozen in a new account, one only he can access when he turns 18. And you two, I looked directly at Andrew and Gabriella, start mandatory financial counseling next week. Or what? Andrew sneered. Or I take this folder of forged documents to the police. Silence. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice raw from crying. The units, can they be saved? Yes, I assured her. Dad left enough in the estate to cover it. Andrew and Gabriella have to agree to the term. All of them. I handed out copies of the repayment plan. As they read, my phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Wilson. Your father would be proud. Meeting tomorrow to finalize everything. Before anyone could argue, Christian spoke up again. Dad, just sign it, please. I don't want to have to show everyone at school what you really did. Andrew's face went pale. The recording. His own son. Gabriella signed it first. Andrew followed, his hand shaking, whether from rage, shame, or both. I couldn't tell. As I drove home, the messages started pouring in. Andrew, threats. Mom, tearful apologies. Christian, a long text asking if he could stay with me for a few days until things calm down. Tomorrow, we will meet with Mr. Wilson to make everything official, but something tells me that this isn't over. Andrew is too proud. Gabriella is way too desperate, and there are decades of family dynamics to unravel. At least now, everyone knows the truth, even if they didn't want to hear it. Final update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post. I waited until everything was finalized before sharing this. What had happened wasn't just a resolution. It was a complete dismantling of my brother's carefully crafted facade. Some might call it karma, I call it justice. The morning after our family meeting, Andrew made his fatal mistake. He tried to drain Mom's accounts, all of them. What he didn't know, I had already frozen everything the night before. His attempted theft triggered exactly what I had hoped for: an automatic fraud alert and an immediate investigation. And here's where Dad's foresight truly shines. The USB drives he left in the garage safe, they contained years of recorded conversations. Every loan request, every lie, every manipulation, and the final recording, Dad on his hospital bed while Andrew desperately tried to get him to sign over Power of Eternity while he was heavily medicated. Mr. Wilson and I executed the plan perfectly. We submitted all evidence of the forged signatures to the authorities. Then we exposed the credit card fraud. The look on Andrew's face when investigators showed up at his office, priceless. One of his colleagues even emailed me the security footage. Gabriella, meanwhile, tried to do damage control, calling everyone in their social circle, spinning tales about how I was destroying the family. But remember that financial advisor from our last meeting? Turns out he had been keeping his own records of their scheme. When he presented evidence that Andrew and Gabriella had been running a small investment scam within their social circle, their so-called friends turned on them faster than sharks smelling blood. And the school situation, it resolved itself in the most ironic way possible. Christian, my brave, brilliant nephew, forwarded all of his recordings to the school board. Not only did they grant him emergency financial aid, but they also launched an investigation into the donations Andrew and Gabriella had been claiming on their taxes. Spoiler alert, those donations never existed. Then came the final breaking point. Mom finally saw their true colors when, in desperation, Andrew tried to pin everything on her. He claimed she had authorized all the loans and credit cards. That's when I played my trump card. I pulled out Dad's final video message, recorded just a week before he passed. He detailed exactly how Andrew had manipulated and stolen from both of our parents for years. The fallout was immediate. The Mountain View property saved and restructured. Mom's retirement secured. Christian's college fund not only recovered, but tripled thanks to a secret investment account Dad had set up when Christian was born. Andrew never even knew it existed. But the real satisfaction, it came from an unexpected source. Remember Aunt Linda, who sat silently during our family meeting? She finally confessed why she had been protecting Andrew for so long. He had been blackmailing her with fabricated evidence of tax fraud. But when we exposed that lie, she provided years of emails showing how Andrew had systematically manipulated and exploited nearly every family member. And then the dominoes fell oh so beautifully. Andrew's firm suspended him pending a full investigation. Their country club membership revoked. Apparently, they had been charging thousands to other members' accounts. Their dream house in foreclosure. Their social circle completely ostracized them. 3 of their former friends had already filed lawsuits over the investment scam. And Gabriella, her final attempt at redemption backfired spectacularly. She actually tried to hold a press conference, yes, really, to paint herself as a victim of circumstances. That's when Christian dropped the hammer. He released group chat screenshots showing Gabriella actively planning to exploit more family members. Their final move? They're downsizing to a small apartment across town. Christian, however, chose to stay with me temporarily, but with full legal backing thanks to Mr. Wilson's connection. The court was particularly interested in the recording of Andrew threatening him for exposing their scheme. As for Mom, she's doing better. Yesterday, we sorted through Dad's old office and found a letter he had written to me years ago. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. Rock bottom has a way of building foundations for better things. The family dynamics had permanently shifted. Most relatives had actually cut ties with Andrew Andrew and Gabriella. And those who haven't, they're keeping their distance. Mom hosts Sunday dinners now. Smaller, quieter affairs. Free from the cloud of manipulation. But the real victory, Christian's transformation. Free from his parents' influence. He's thriving. Christian is finally arriving. His grades have improved. He's making real friends. And yesterday, he told me he wants to study finance. To help people, not hurt them, as he put it. As for me, I bought the Mountain View property from Mom. At full market value. Everything was legal, documented, and above board. I'm converting it into affordable housing unit with one ironclad rule. Andrew and Gabriella will never be allowed to rent there. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Dad's final message keeps replaying in my mind. Son, sometimes love means watching someone lose everything they stole so they can finally build everything real. Andrew and Gabriella are now facing multiple investigations, civil lawsuits, and complete social isolation. Their house of cards didn't just collapse, it burned. And I made sure to document every moment of its downfall. The family thinks I'm done, but they're wrong. I've set up a trust fund for Christian, one that Andrew and Gabriella will never have access to even after he turns 18. Every penny they stole, they'll repay it with interest through wage garnishment if necessary. Their reputation in this town is shattered. Not because of rumor, not because of lies, but because of the truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone fall, it's making sure they can never rebuild the illusion again. Christian is staying with me through the school year. Last night, he asked if we could frame Dad's last letter and hang it in his new room to remind me, he said, that doing the right thing matters more than just looking right. Dad's legacy will live on, after all, just not through the son everyone expected. Thank you for watching.